My house smells of medicine and loneliness. Evelyn always made sure there were fresh flowers or scented candles in every room. She said a house should be alive. Now only Tobias, the old cat, occasionally breaks the oppressive silence with his hoarse meow. 40 years of marriage, a lifetime. First in a tiny apartment where we saved on everything, then the gradual rise. The purchase of this house on the outskirts of Trinidad. Evelyn worked as an accountant for an insurance company, me as a taxidermist at the local natural history museum. We were never rich, but we made a decent living. I look at our wedding photo, 1983. We're so young, so happy. Evelyn in a simple white dress her mother made, me in a suit borrowed from my older brother. We met at the town fair, where I was helping set up a museum booth with stuffed local fauna. She came over interested in the work process and said, "I've never seen dead things look so alive." We talked all day, and 6 months later we were married. Howie was born 2 years after the wedding, a strong, healthy boy with a loud voice and a stubborn temper. Evelyn loved him, and I tried to be a good father, but work took up a lot of my time. When the museum closed for renovations, I had to take private commissions to make ends meet. I missed a lot of important moments. First steps, first word, first day of school. Evelyn never rebuked me, but I could see the disappointment in my son's eyes. The problems began when Howie turned 16. He became distant, snapping at any comment. I remember the first time he didn't come home for a sleepover. Evelyn stayed up all night, and in the morning, when he showed up smelling of alcohol, she just hugged him and cried. I yelled at him, told him not to leave the house for 2 weeks. After that, he looked at me like I was the enemy. "You were always hard on him, Norman," Evelyn said. "The boy needs support, not just rules." Maybe she was right. Maybe that's when I started to lose my son. After high school, he went to college in a neighboring state, as far away from us as possible. He only came back for the holidays, and he didn't want to. He talked mostly to his mother, barely noticed me. When he had money problems during school, he asked Evelyn for money, but never me. She always gave, even though we couldn't afford to spend too much. "He's our son, Norman. How can we say no?" And I kept silent, though I sensed something was wrong. Too often, he asked, too vague about what the money was for. After college, Howie didn't come back to Trinidad. He took a job up north, rarely called. Then he showed up out of the blue with an idea to open a sporting goods store. Said he'd found investors, but he needed a down payment. Evelyn talked me into selling the stock I'd been saving for our retirement for years. "He's finally coming home. Isn't that wonderful?" I agreed, even though my gut screamed danger. The business really took off. Howie bought a house in a nice neighborhood, married a local girl named Rebecca. A grandson named Ethan was born. Everything seemed to be working out. Evelyn often went to visit, babysat their grandson. I tried too, but I always felt cold. Howie was polite but distant. Rebecca looked at me with ill-concealed disapproval. Apparently, she'd heard stories about her horrible, tyrant father. 5 years ago, I retired. Evelyn kept working. She said she was bored at home. And then her health problems started. At first, we thought it was just fatigue, pallor, shortness of breath, rapid fatigue. Then she was diagnosed with leukemia. Late stage. Howie blamed me for not noticing her condition sooner. "You don't even see her living in the same house," he yelled during one of his hospital visits. Maybe he was right. Maybe I really wasn't noticing the obvious. For the last year of Evelyn's life, we barely left the hospitals. Chemotherapy, remission, relapse, experimental treatments. I was there every day, holding her hand when she was sick, reading aloud her favorite books when she didn't have the strength to hold them in her hands. Howie came once a week, bringing her grandson flowers, fruit. Talked to doctors behind my back as if I were incapable of understanding medical terms. Evelyn was fading before my eyes. In recent weeks, she often asked to be alone with me, sometimes just holding my hand and staring out the window, sometimes talking about the past, about our first apartment, about how we traveled to the mountains when Howie was 5, about how I brought her wildflowers every Friday. Never about the future. We both knew we didn't have one. She died in her sleep, quiet as she lived. I woke up in the morning in an uncomfortable hospital chair and realized her breathing could no longer be heard. The nurses said later that I sat next to the body for 3 hours, not moving, not crying, just holding her hand until she was cold. The funeral was overcast, both because of the weather and the atmosphere. A small cemetery on a hill, a few dozen people, Evelyn's co-workers, neighbors, distant relatives. Howie and his family stood apart from me, as if we were strangers. I noticed him periodically stepping aside with a man in an austere suit. They were talking intensely, glancing in my direction from time to time. After the ceremony, there was a memorial service at the local church. People came up, said the standard words of condolence, patted me awkwardly on the shoulder. Howie and his family sat 3 rows away from me, whispering with Evelyn's relatives. I heard bits and pieces of phrases. Always cold. She deserved better. Doesn't even cry. Rebecca had brought her grandson to me, seemingly on her own initiative, judging by Howie's disgruntled look. Grandpa, is Grandma an angel now? Ethan asked, fiddling with a button on his little black jacket. Yes, baby, I answered, trying to hold back the tears that for some reason had decided to burst out now. The most beautiful angel. Howie, take him away, my son said sharply, coming toward us. I don't want the baby to see this. This was me, crying for the first time in years. Howie took his son's hand and led him to the other end of the hall, saying something angrily to Rebecca. After the service, people dispersed, some offering me a ride home, but I declined. I wanted to be alone, to walk, to clear my head. The house greeted me with emptiness and silence. The indicator light on the answering machine was blinking. 3 new messages. The first 2 were from neighbors with offers of help. The third was from a man who introduced himself as Arthur Kingsley, Evelyn's attorney. Mr. Prescott, my condolences. Mrs. Prescott contacted me several months ago to draft a will. Please contact me to discuss the details and set a date for the formal reading. Here is my number. I called back the next morning. Mr. Kingsley turned out to be the same man Howie had whispered to at the funeral. His voice sounded professionally neutral, but I felt a hint of sympathy slipping in. Mrs. Prescott left clear instructions, he said. The will must be read in the presence of you and your son. We can meet at my office at your convenience next week. Does Howie know yet? I contacted him right after the service, Mr. Prescott. He suggested next Tuesday, 10 a.m. Is that a good time for you? I didn't care. The time, the day, the place. Evelyn was gone. What did it matter? I agreed and hung up. The next few days passed like a blur. I didn't sleep well, hardly ate. My neighbor, Mrs. Flynn, brought food, but it remained untouched in the fridge. Tobias rubbed against my legs, demanding attention I couldn't give. There was too much of Evelyn in the house. Her clothes in the closet, her favorite cup on the kitchen shelf, her gardening gloves stacked neatly on the porch, her scent on the pillow. Sunday night, Howie called. It surprised me. He rarely called, preferring to communicate through Evelyn. His voice sounded strange, like he was trying to hold back emotions, but I couldn't tell which ones. Are you going to see Kingsley? He asked without greeting. Yes, of course. 10 o'clock Tuesday morning. You know, he sounded annoyed. You could just sign a waiver. Kingsley said it was an option. You don't have to go through all that formality. A waiver? What are you talking about, Howie? Don't pretend you don't understand. His voice grew colder. Mom deserves peace, and I'm not going to let you use her death for your own gain. He hung up before I could answer. I sat staring at the phone, trying to comprehend what had just happened. What benefit was he talking about? What kind of claim? Evelyn and I had never had any serious money or possessions other than the house. What could there be in that will? Tobias jumped into my lap and curled up in a ball, as if he sensed my confusion. I stroked him mechanically, immersed in heavy thoughts. When and how had I lost my son? Was it all my fault? What would Evelyn say seeing us now? The water in the shower did not wash away the anxiety. I stood under the scalding jets, trying to gather my thoughts before meeting with the lawyer. Why was Howie acting so strange? What secret had Evelyn been keeping in the last months of her life? These questions swirled around in my head, keeping me from focusing. I wiped myself down and shaved, trying not to cut myself with my trembling hands. The mirror reflected an old man, a gaunt face, sunken eyes, deep wrinkles. When had I gotten so old? Evelyn always said I looked younger than my age, but now it was as if I'd made up for it. There was cold coffee waiting in the kitchen. I took a sip and grimaced. I couldn't remember the last time I'd eaten properly. Maybe that's why my thoughts were jumbled. I pulled bread and cheese out of the fridge, whatever the thoughtful Mrs. Flynn had brought. I put together a sandwich, but I didn't feel like eating. My thoughts went back to Evelyn's strange behavior in recent months. It had started about 6 months before her death, when she was still feeling relatively well. Remission was a hope that we now knew was not to be realized. Evelyn began talking on the phone for long periods of time, lowering her voice when I entered the room. Several times I caught her at her computer. She hurriedly closed the laptop lid and smiled strainedly. "Is something wrong, dear?" I asked. "Nothing, Norman. Just looking at some old pictures." Memories came flooding back, she answered, but her eyes said otherwise. Then her strange absences began. Despite her illness, she insisted that I not accompany her to certain procedures. She said they were just consultations, nothing serious. I didn't insist. I wanted to believe that it was true, that it wasn't that bad. One day I came home earlier than usual. The museum had canceled a tour I was supposed to lead. Evelyn wasn't expecting me. I heard her voice from a small office on the second floor. She was on the phone with someone, and her voice sounded unusually firm. "Yes, I checked everything." "The sums don't add up, Arthur. It can't be a simple mistake." "No, I don't want him to know. At least not yet." "Yes, I understand the implications." When I knocked on the door, she flinched and quickly ended the conversation. "Who's Arthur?" I asked. "Just the new counselor from the hospital, honey. He's helping with the insurance paperwork," she replied, but didn't look me in the eye. After that, she started locking herself in her office. I could hear her moving some papers around, sometimes crying. When I offered to help, she waved it away. "It's just paperwork, Norman. I don't want to burden you." 3 months before she left, Evelyn asked me to update a picture of her in the family album. "I want you to remember me as I am now," she said. I took the picture, even though at that moment she looked particularly haggard after another round of treatments. When I developed the photo, old-fashioned I know, but I never trusted digital copies, she stared at it for a long time and then said a strange phrase. "You know, Norman, it's only at death's door that you realize who was really with you in life." I tried to distract her, to tell her that it was too early to talk about death, that there would be another remission, that the new experimental treatment might help. She just shook her head and smiled, that special smile that appeared when she knew something I didn't. Not long after that, Howie showed up unexpectedly. No warning, no call, just a knock on the door on a Tuesday night. Evelyn was in her room, resting after a hard day at the hospital. I let my son in, offered coffee, but he declined. "Where's Mom?" he asked, looking around. "Resting. It's been a rough day. New doctor, new tests. I have to talk to her." Now. His tone left no room for objection. I offered to wait until morning, but he insisted. He walked up the stairs without taking off his shoes, another little thing that annoyed Evelyn, but she never admonished her favorite son. They talked for about an hour. I didn't eavesdrop, it wasn't my policy, but their voices sometimes rose, especially Howie's. When he came downstairs, his face was red, his eyes glistening with either anger or unshed tears. "Are you satisfied?" he tossed to me. "What do you mean, Howie?" "Don't pretend. You've always turned her against me. Now you've gotten your way." He sprinted out of the house, slamming the door so hard the glass rattled. When I went up to Evelyn's room, she was lying there with her eyes closed. I thought she was asleep, but she spoke. "He'll never understand, Norman. He'll never see what you were really like." "What do you mean, dear?" "What's wrong?" "Just hold my hand." "Please." I sat next to her all night, holding her slender fingers in mine. In the morning she was weaker than usual, and we went to the hospital. She never came home again. Her condition deteriorated dramatically, and the doctors insisted on hospitalization. The phone call snapped me out of my memories. I flinched, spilling the rest of my cold coffee onto my sweater. Howie's number. Had he decided to apologize for yesterday? "Yeah," I replied, trying to sound neutral. "Listen, Father," he began without greeting. "I've been thinking about our conversation. I didn't mean to be so harsh, but you have to understand my position." "What position, Howie?" "I still don't know what you're talking about." He sighed as if he were explaining the obvious to a child. "Mom left something you don't know about, something important, and I think I'm more entitled to it than you are." "What exactly is it, Howie?" "You'll find out tomorrow." But I want you to be ready. Don't make a scene. Don't make it complicated. Just sign the papers Kingsley gives you, and we'll part peacefully. Howie, I have no idea what you mean. Of course you don't, he interrupted sarcastically. Nor about the fact that Mom put $50,000 into my business from her personal account that you didn't know about. Like the fact that she promised to help buy a summer home for Ethan. Like the fact that she wanted her inheritance to go toward her grandson's education, not your hobbies. I was silent, stunned. A personal account? 50,000? We'd never had separate finances. In 40 years of marriage, all the money had always gone into a joint budget. Where could she have gotten that kind of money? And what did he mean by hobbies? Howie, I think there's some mistake here. There's no mistake, Father. It's just that Mom finally realized who really cared for her all these years. Who was there for her when you were gone? Who listened to her when you were busy with your dead animals? There was a lingering resentment in his voice. I understood its source. My years of working late, missing school events, weekends spent in the workshop instead of with my family. But there was something else in his words, some confidence that shouldn't have been there. Howie, let's meet before tomorrow's meeting. Let's talk quietly. You and Rebecca could come over. I'll cook. No, he cut off. Whatever needs to be said will be said tomorrow. In the presence of a lawyer. He hung up again without saying goodbye. I sat staring at the silent phone, trying to figure out what was going on. An account I didn't know about? Money invested in my son's business without my knowledge? That didn't sound like Evelyn. She was always open about financial matters. We always discussed big spending sprees. I went up to the second floor to her little office. After her hospitalization, I hadn't gone in there. I didn't want to disturb her space. Now, on a sudden impulse, I turned the knob. The door was unlocked. The room smelled of her perfume, the light lavender scent she'd favored in recent years. The desk was neatly organized, and there were pictures on the walls. Our wedding, Howie in her graduation gown, the three of us in front of the Grand Canyon, little Ethan in his grandmother's arms. I pulled out the top drawer of my desk. Office supplies neatly organized into compartments. The second, folders with medical records, test results, hospital bills. Nothing out of the ordinary. The bottom drawer revealed a locked wooden box. I'd never seen it before. The key was nowhere to be seen. I lifted the box carefully. It wasn't heavy, but there was clearly something inside. The lock looked simple. Surely it could be opened without a key. I stopped myself. Number. If Evelyn was hiding something, she had her reasons. I'd find out tomorrow, legally, just like she wanted. I carefully put the box back in its place and closed the drawer. Going downstairs, I poured myself a whiskey for the first time in a long time. Evelyn didn't like it when I drank hard liquor, saying it was bad for my liver. Right now, I felt like a little numbness wouldn't hurt. The strange feeling never left me. In our 40 years together, there had been no secrets between us, at least, I thought so. What could have caused her to hide something from me in the last months of her life? What could have happened that I didn't know about? Maybe she was really disappointed in me. Maybe I wasn't as good a husband as I thought I was. These thoughts stung like wasps. I remembered our last conversations at the hospital. She often talked about the past, sometimes starting a sentence and not finishing, as if she'd changed her mind. One time she said, "Norman, I want you to know that no matter what happens, I will always," and fell silent, looking out the window. "Always what, dear?" I asked. "Always knew who you really were," she finished, squeezing my hand. At the time, I had thought it was just the sentimentality of a dying woman. Now those words took on a new, sinister connotation. What did she mean? What did she know about me that I didn't know myself? The whiskey burned my throat, but it didn't bring relief. I set the glass down and went to the window. It was getting dark outside, and the neighbors were turning on the lights in their houses. The normal life I no longer had. Money. Everything always comes down to money. I've never been obsessed with it. Enough to live comfortably, save for retirement, travel occasionally. Nothing more. Evelyn was even more practical. Frugal by nature, she knew how to squeeze the most out of every dollar. We weren't rich, but we weren't poor. After retirement, I received a small allowance from the museum. Evelyn continued to work until her illness. She said she liked being in a team, feeling needed. Her salary was more than my pension, but not enough to put away significant sums. At least that's what I thought. I always thought I knew everything about our financial situation. Every month we sat down at the table, went over the bills, planned our expenses. But what if she's been doing double bookkeeping all this time? What if she was saving part of her paycheck in a separate account that I didn't know about? And for what? For Howie? For her grandson? Or, uh, in case she wanted to leave me? That thought struck like a bolt of lightning. No, that's impossible. Evelyn loved me. I knew that as surely as I knew my own name. In the most difficult times, when financial problems or my job created tension, she never talked about leaving. Even when I made her wait late, missed family dinners because of urgent orders, she understood and forgave. Or was it not forgiveness, but humility? The patience of a person who waits for the right moment to make a change? No, I couldn't believe it. I didn't want to believe it. Tobias jumped onto the windowsill and rubbed against my arm, demanding attention. I absent-mindedly stroked him. This was the cat Evelyn had brought home 10 years ago, a skinny, sickly kitten someone had dumped at the supermarket. I was against it. I'd never liked cats, thought they were unpredictable and willful. But Evelyn insisted, and gradually Tobias became part of our lives. Now he was the only other living thing in the house besides me. Shirty you. What is she up to, Tobias? I asked the cat, not expecting an answer. What's happened in the last few months? Tobias blinked his yellow eyes and jumped off the windowsill, heading for the empty bowl. At least his needs were plain and simple. I poured in the feed and thought again. No matter what was in that will, no matter what Evelyn was hiding, the money wasn't worth breaking up with my son. If Howie cared so much about this inheritance, let him take it all. I'm 67. My house is almost paid off. My pension is enough to live modestly. What more do I need? But it wasn't about the money. I could feel it. It was about the truth that Evelyn took with her, the secret she'd kept for the last months of her life. And that secret was somehow connected to Howie, to his certainty that the inheritance belonged to him, to his anger directed at me. I went up to the bedroom and lay down without undressing. I couldn't sleep. Pictures of the past flashed before my eyes. Our first apartment, Howie's birth, family trips, quarrels, reconciliations, quiet evenings with books, loud holiday dinners. Was our life as I remembered it? Or was I only seeing what I wanted to see? At one point, though, I did fall into a disturbing dream. I dreamed of Evelyn, young, in the same white dress from her wedding. She was standing on the shore of the lake, saying something to me, but I couldn't hear over the sound of the waves. I tried to move closer, but with each step she grew farther away. "What are you trying to say?" I shouted. "The truth has always been before you." I finally made out her words, and I woke up. Outside my window, Tuesday morning was graying, the day I was supposed to learn the truth. Tuesday morning was chilly. A light rain turned the streets of Trinidad into mirrors reflecting the gray sky. I left the house without an umbrella. I didn't think, and it didn't matter. I got into the old Ford and stared at the wet road in front of me for a long time before I turned the ignition key. The clock on the dashboard read 8:30. The meeting was an hour and a half away, but there was no more energy left to sit at home, alone with his thoughts. The city was waking up slowly. The few passers-by went about their business, hiding their faces under umbrellas and hoods. I drove slowly, taking in the streets familiar from my childhood. Trinidad was changing before my eyes. Old buildings giving way to new shopping centers, parks shrinking under the onslaught of parking lots. Even the people seemed different. Or was it me who had changed? Not far from Mr. Kingsley's office, I stopped at a small coffee shop. It was warm inside and smelled of freshly baked goods. I ordered a coffee and a sandwich, though I still had no appetite. "Lousy weather," the girl behind the counter said, punching in my order. "They say it'll clear up by tonight." "I hope so," I answered automatically, though the weather was the last thing I cared about. I chose a table by the window and watched the rain paint intricate patterns on the glass. What awaited me in an hour? What secret was Evelyn keeping? What does Howie know that I don't? My thoughts returned to our conversation the day before. "Just sign the papers and we'll part ways peacefully," he said, as if we were business partners, not father and son. as if there had never been anything more than a formal relationship between us. Maybe that was the case. I tried to be a good father, but work always took up too much of my time. Parent-teacher conferences, sporting events, school concerts. How much did I miss while immersed in my projects? Evelyn was always there, supporting her son, applauding his successes, consoling him in his failures. I, on the other hand, I provided for the family, but it wasn't enough. When Howie was 10, I missed his performance in the school talent show. I got a rush order from the museum to prepare pieces for a new exhibit. I promised I'd be there, but I couldn't make it. Evelyn had videotaped the performance. Howie played the flute, not bad for his age. When I watched the tape that evening and praised my son, he shrugged and retired to his room. "Give him time," Evelyn said. "He was really looking forward to seeing you today." Time passed, but nothing changed. Missed birthdays, delayed promises, evenings when I came home and he was already asleep. It didn't take long for a wall of alienation to grow between us. By my teenage years, Howie was no longer waiting for me at his shows or sharing his problems. All questions and requests went through Evelyn. And then he left to go to school and became even farther away. Calls home became less and less frequent, and when he did call, he spoke mostly to his mother. He answered my questions with one-word answers, never talked about his life. When he brought Rebecca to meet us, I saw for the first time how lively and cheerful my son could be with her, with Evelyn, but not with me. Perhaps it's not just my busyness. Maybe we're just different people. Howie has always been more like Evelyn, outgoing, emotional, easy to get along with people. I'm more of an introvert, preferring the quiet of the workshop to the noisy company. Maybe he just didn't understand me, just as I didn't understand him. The coffee was cold, and the untouched sandwich was stale. I glanced at the clock, 9:20. Time to move. I paid and walked out into the rain, which intensified. Mr. Kingsley's office was in an old red brick building downtown. It used to be a factory, then warehouses, and now offices for lawyers, insurance agents, and accountants. I parked on a nearby street and walked to the entrance. The lobby was quiet and empty. I climbed the creaky wooden stairs to the second floor. A corridor with dim lights, a row of doors with signs. Arthur Kingsley Legal Services, one of them read. The handle turned easily and the door opened. The reception area was small but cozy. Dark furniture, burgundy walls, bookcases with legal tomes. At the desk sat the receptionist, a young woman with her hair neatly bunched. "Good morning," I said, taking off my wet jacket. "I'm Norman Prescott. I have an appointment with Mr. Kingsley." "Good morning, Mr. Prescott," she smiled. "Mr. Kingsley is expecting you. Your son is already here." I nodded and turned toward the office door, but at that moment it swung open and Howie appeared on the doorstep. He looked good, expensive suit, fashionable haircut, confident posture. Only his eyes gave away his inner tension. Too bright, too nervous. When he saw me, he stopped, as if he'd run into an invisible wall. His lips pressed into a thin line. "What are you doing here?" he asked quietly but clearly. "I have a meeting with Mr. Kingsley." "So do you," I answered, trying to keep my voice calm. Howie stepped forward, blocking my path to the office door. He was half a head taller than me and much stronger. The years of working in a sporting goods store hadn't gone to waste. "You're not mentioned here," he said, raising his voice. "You have no business being at this meeting." I looked straight into his eyes, trying to find a bit of the boy I'd once taught to ride a bike. I couldn't find it. "Mr. Kingsley invited me, Howie. Evelyn wanted me here." "Don't you dare tell me what Mama wanted," he was almost shouting now. "You have no idea what she wanted. You never listened to her, never understood. You were always busy with your stuffed animals, your projects, and now you show up for the money?" The secretary looked at us with wide-open eyes. I felt the blood rush to my cheeks, not from shame, but from anger. 40 years with Evelyn, by my side every day, especially in the last months of her illness. How dare he say I didn't know her? "Howie," I began, trying to control my voice. "I don't know what happened between you and your mother, but—" "Nothing happened," he interrupted. "Shunisham, she just finally realized who you were. Realized that you never really loved her. That you—" The office door opened again, and Arthur Kingsley appeared on the threshold, a tall, thin man in his 50s, wearing an austere gray suit. He looked around at the scene in the reception room and frowned. "Gentlemen," he said, "I can hear you through the closed door. I suppose we can continue this conversation in a more civilized atmosphere." Howie turned to the lawyer. "He shouldn't be here," he said, nodding in my direction. "This is a family matter. Mr. Prescott, Jr." Kingsley spoke calmly but firmly. "Your mother left clear instructions. The will must be read in the presence of both of you. No exceptions." "But she—" "No exceptions," Kingsley repeated. "Please come into the study." Howie gave me an angry look, but stepped back, letting me through the door. I walked past him, feeling his hatred in my back. Kingsley's office was the same as the reception area: dark wood, leather furniture, bookcases to the ceiling, diplomas and certificates framed on the walls. A large desk took center stage with two visitors' chairs on either side of it. "Have a seat, gentlemen," Kingsley pointed to the chairs. "May I offer you coffee? Water?" We both said no. I sank into the chair, feeling suddenly weak in my legs. Howie sat across from me, looking impatient. Kingsley took a seat at the desk, pulling a file from a drawer. "Before we begin, let me again express my condolences on the passing of Mrs. Prescott. She was a remarkable woman." "Thank you," I said. Howie was silent. "Mrs. Prescott approached me about 4 months before she passed away," Kingsley continued, opening the folder. "She wanted to revise her will in the light of certain circumstances that had come to her attention." I noticed Howie tense at those words. His fingers clenched into fists so hard his knuckles turned white. "Let's cut to the chase," he said sharply. Kingsley nodded, pulling a sealed envelope from the folder. "Mrs. Prescott left her will in this envelope. She asked that I open it in your presence and read it aloud. She also prepared a video message for us to watch after the reading of the will." "A video message?" Kingsley hadn't mentioned that before. I glanced at Howie. He looked equally surprised. Kingsley carefully opened the envelope and pulled out several sheets of paper. He coughed and began to read. "I, Evelyn Mary Prescott, of sound mind and good judgment, make this will as an expression of my last will and testament. I leave everything to the one who has never betrayed my husband." Kingsley paused and looked up from the document. I sat stunned by those words. Howie was petrified, his face white as chalk. "What?" he blurted out. It's impossible. There must be some explanation." "If I may continue," Kingsley said, and returned to reading, "To my husband, Norman Edward Prescott, I leave all property belonging to me, including but not limited to our home at 27 Oak Street, all bank accounts registered in my name, all securities and investments, all personal effects and household goods. I am making this choice knowingly and deliberately after facts have come to my attention that have completely changed the way I view my own family. To my son, Howard James Prescott, I leave nothing but this explanation. You have betrayed not only me, but yourself, your wife, and your son. I pray that one day you will realize this and change." A heavy silence hung in the office. I looked at Howie, trying to figure out what was going on. He sat motionless, only his cheekbones showing. "It's illegal," he finally said. "She was sick, out of her mind. He nodded in my direction, manipulated her. I'll argue that." "Mrs. Prescott anticipated that reaction," Kingsley replied. "Not Arena, that's why she insisted on a video message and provided me with all the evidence I needed to prove her capacity at the time she made the will, including the opinions of 3 independent psychiatrists." He pressed a button on the remote, and a projection came to life on the office wall. Evelyn sitting in a hospital room, pale, gaunt, but her eyes were bright, lively, determined. That's how I remembered her in the last few days. "Hello," she began. "If you're watching this video, it means I'm gone. Norman, darling, I'm sorry I didn't tell you everything in my lifetime. I was afraid you'd do something rash. You always had such a temper when it came to family. Howie, I know you're angry right now. I know you're going to blame your father. But the truth is, I found out about your double life, your second family in Portland, about the woman named Veronica and the 2 children you kept from all of us, from Rebecca, from Ethan, from my father and me. I happened to see you with them when I went to see a specialist in Portland for counseling. You didn't notice me. You were coming out of the restaurant. You, a woman and 2 kids. You hugged her the way you hug Rebecca. The kids called you Daddy. I hired a private investigator. He confirmed my worst fears. 10 years, Howie. 10 years you've been living a double life. 10 years of lying to all of us. The money you asked me for the business, for the house, for Ethan, it all went to your second family. I didn't tell Rebecca. I didn't want to ruin her life, Ethan's life. But I couldn't let you inherit what your father and I spent a lifetime building and use it to continue your deception. Norman, honey, I'm sorry I didn't tell you. I know it wasn't fair of me, but I was afraid you'd snap, that something irreparable would happen between you and Howie. You've always protected your family like a lion. I love you both. Even now. Howie, I hope you can find the strength to come clean and start over. Norman, I hope you can forgive your son when the time comes. In the meantime, live life to the fullest. You deserve it. You were always there for me when I needed you. Always been honest with me. Never betrayed me. The video ended. I sat there stunned, unable to comprehend what I had heard. A second family? 10 years of deceit? The money we'd given him? All those years. Howie jumped up, knocking over the chair. It's a fake, he screamed. You two are in cahoots. You, he pointed a trembling finger at me. You've always wanted to turn her against me. You've always hated me. Mr. Prescott. Kingsley's voice was calm but firm. This video was recorded in front of a notary public. Its authenticity is beyond question. In addition, I have the detective's full report, including photographs, bank statements, and other evidence. Howie looked cornered. His eyes darted from me to Kingsley and back again. Suddenly, all his rage seemed to evaporate, leaving only fear. Shama Sawam, she wasn't supposed to find out, he muttered. No one could have found out. Howie, I began, still in disbelief. Why? Why did you? He didn't let me finish. He turned and ran out of the office, slamming the door loudly. A few seconds later, we heard the front door of the reception area slam. I sat there trying to piece my thoughts together. Everything I'd thought about my son, about my family, about the last few months of Evelyn's life, it was all falling apart like a house of cards. Mr. Prescott, Kingsley's voice brought me back to reality. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. Mrs. Prescott wanted to keep you out of pain as long as possible. She knew, all along. And she didn't tell me, I said, tears coming to my throat. She found out shortly before she came to me. About 5 months before she died, Kingsley explained. And yes, she chose not to tell you for fear of your reaction. She was worried about your health, about your relationship with your son. Relationship? I grinned bitterly. What relationship, Mr. Kingsley? You've seen the way he talks to me. He's hated me all his adult life. And now I find out that the man I thought was my son all this time. I couldn't finish. The picture Evelyn painted was too horrible, too unreal. And at the same time, it explained a lot. Howie's frequent trips, his constant requests for money, his aloofness, his strange behavior in the last months of Evelyn's life. What now? I asked, feeling completely lost. Legally, it's quite simple, Kingsley replied. Your wife's will is impeccable. Your son will probably try to contest it, but he has little chance, given the evidence and the video message. We'll go through the standard procedure, and in a few weeks, Mrs. Prescott's estate will be officially transferred to you. And unofficially? I asked. What am I supposed to do with this? With what I've learned? Kingsley sighed and took off his glasses. It's not my job, Mr. Prescott, but if I may offer a personal opinion, your wife was hoping this would be the start of something new. For you, for your son. She believed that the truth, however bitter, was better than a lie. I nodded, unable to speak. Evelyn had always been wiser than me. Even as she walked away, she thought of the future, of the possibility of undoing what seemed irreparable. I'd like to read the detective's report, I said finally. I want to know everything. Sure, Kingsley pulled a thick stack of documents out of a folder. This is a copy. You can take it with you. I accepted the folder, feeling its weight, and not just physically. It was the truth about my son, about the man I'd continued to love in spite of everything. One more thing, Kingsley handed me a small key. It was for the box Mrs. Prescott kept in her study. She asked me to give it to you after the reading of the will. Said you'd find something inside that would help you understand her decision. I clutched the key in my palm, the same key to the box I'd found in her desk yesterday. Evelyn had thought of everything, everything. "Thank you, Mr. Kingsley," I said, rising, "for everything." "You're welcome, Mr. Prescott. And again, my condolences. Your wife was an exceptional woman." "Yes," I nodded, feeling the tears finally break through. "She was." I walked out of the office, clutching the folder with the detective's report and the small key to the truth that Evelyn had kept to the last. In the reception area, the receptionist avoided my gaze. She must have heard Howie screaming. I didn't care. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sky was still gray, but the first rays of sunlight were breaking through the clouds. I got in the car and put the folder on the passenger seat. I was going to learn the truth about my son, about my family, about the last months of Evelyn's life. I wasn't sure I was ready for that. I wasn't sure I would ever be ready. But Evelyn wanted me to know, wanted the truth to finally come out. And I couldn't deny her this last request. The drive home seemed endless. I drove slowly, mechanically performing the familiar actions of turning, braking, shifting gears. The folder with the detective's report lay on the passenger seat like a living thing radiating anxiety and pain. I couldn't bring myself to open it until I was home. Evelyn's words from the videotape kept running through my mind. The second family, a woman named Veronica, 2 children. How was that possible? How did Howie manage to lead a double life for years? How did we not notice? How did I not notice? Tobias met me at the door, meowing demandingly. I machine-fed his bowl, poured fresh water. The routine helped me not to think about the contents of the folder I'd placed on the kitchen table. Before I started reading, I went up to Evelyn's office. The box was waiting in the bottom drawer of the desk, dark wood, simple lock. The small key slid easily into the keyhole and turned with a quiet click. Inside were photographs, letters, and a thin leather-bound notebook. I recognized Evelyn's handwriting, neat, with a slight slant to the right. A diary. She'd never mentioned that she kept a diary. When I opened the first page, I saw the date. 6 months before she died, the day she'd accidentally seen our son with another family. I can't believe my eyes. My boy, my Howie. How could he? At first I thought I was mistaken, that it was just a look-alike. But it was him, his walk, his laugh, his gestures. He was holding the hand of a little girl, about 5 years old, and a woman and a teenage boy were walking beside him. They looked like a family, a happy family. And Howie looked, so peaceful, like I'd never seen him with Rebecca. I turned the page. The entries were getting more and more disturbing. Hired a detective. Can't tell Norman. It would kill him. He's always blamed himself for the fact that he and Howie aren't close, if he finds out the truth. No, I have to be sure first. And a week later, the detective confirmed my worst fears. Her name is Veronica Lynch. They met when Howie was in college. They have 2 children, Emma, 6 years old, and Jason, 14. Jason is not Howie's own son, but he is raising him as his own. They live in a suburb of Portland, in a house that Howie bought 5 years ago, with the money Norman and I gave him to grow the business. I closed the journal, unable to read any further. 5 years ago, that's when Evelyn had talked me into selling the stock to help my son expand the business. $30,000 was our rainy day savings, to buy another woman's house. I went down to the kitchen, poured myself a whiskey, straight from the morning, for the first time in my life. I needed something to dull the pain when I opened the folder with the detective's report. First came the photos, crisp, professional shots. Howie stepping out of a neat 2-story house in the suburbs. Howie hugging a slender, dark-haired woman, not at all like the blonde Rebecca. Howie playing baseball with a teenage boy. Howie holding a little girl who looked remarkably like himself at the same age. The photos were followed by a text report. The dry facts, arranged in chronological order, painted a picture of the double life my son had led for the past 10 years. It all started when he was in college. Veronica was a local girl, working at a coffee shop near campus. Single mom with a young son. Howie spent all his free time with her, helped with the baby. When he graduated, they were supposed to break up. He promised to come back to Trinidad, to Evelyn and me, but he couldn't leave them. Instead, he created an elaborate scheme. Officially moved to Trinidad, opened a sporting goods store as planned, met Rebecca, got married, had a son. All the while, he traveled to Portland every week, ostensibly for business. Sometimes for a day, sometimes for 3. Veronica and the kids thought he was a sales rep and traveled a lot. Rebecca, did she know? Based on the report number, she accepted his explanations about increasing his sales area and meeting with vendors. She never suspected that 4 hours away from their home, her husband had a second life. Next were the bank statements. Howie was taking money from us, from Evelyn, from the bank, from investors, and spending a significant portion of it on supporting a second family. A house, a car, private school for Jason, dance classes for Emma. On paper, the store was barely afloat, though it should have been thriving. The last few pages of the report were the hardest. The detective overheard a conversation between Howie and Veronica. They were discussing the future, planning to buy a bigger house. Howie said he would soon be able to spend more time with them. Mom is terminally ill. It's a matter of months. After she dies, I'll have money. I'll be able to spend 4 or 5 days a week with you guys. I'll leave the store to a helper. I tossed the report aside, unable to read any further. The whiskey burned my throat, but it didn't bring relief. My son. My only son planned his life around his mother's death, used our grief as an opportunity for his own machinations. I went back to the box, pulled out the remaining documents. Among them was a copy of Evelyn's bank statement, which I really didn't know about. Judging by the flow of funds, she had opened it several years before her illness, and periodically transferred small sums there, apparently from her salary. The last transactions on the account were made a month before her death. She withdrew the entire amount, almost $100,000, and transferred them to an account opened in my name, which I also did not know about. She was saving that money. For what? For a rainy day? For the trip we'd always dreamed of? For a peaceful old age? And now she's given it to me, depriving Howie of the last thing he ever hoped for. I remembered Evelyn's strange behavior the last few months. Her secret phone calls, her locked office door, her sudden detachment. It all made sense now. She'd been preparing for this decision, thinking every step of the way, gathering evidence. And all the while she'd been silent, protecting me from the pains she herself felt every day. There was a bookmark in the diary. Evelyn wanted me to read this entry. Norman will never understand why I didn't tell him right away. He's a straightforward man, always believing that problems should be solved immediately. But I know my husband better than he knows himself. I know the news of Howie's double life will break his heart. I know he blames himself for their complicated relationship. I can't add that pain to his grief over my passing. Let the time pass. Let him recover a little from my death. And then let him learn the truth. The truth about the son we raised together, but apparently never fully knew. I believe in Norman. I believe he can do this. He's stronger than he thinks. He always has been. That's why I fell in love with him 40 years ago and still do. He's never betrayed me, never lied to me. Even when the truth was inconvenient or painful, he deserves everything I can give him. Howie. I don't know what happened to my boy. Where did Norman and I go wrong? Maybe it's not us. Maybe he's just that kind of person. Unable to choose one path, always wanting more. I love him no matter what. He's my son, but I can't let him continue to live a lie. I can't let him use money earned through honest labor to cheat. Norman, if you're reading this, forgive my silence. And know that no matter what happens, I never doubted you. I closed the journal, feeling the tears streaming down my cheeks. Evelyn had protected me to the last, thinking of me even as she suffered from her son's betrayal and terminal illness. A phone call snapped me out of my daze. I glanced at the screen, the number for Rebecca, Howie's wife. Not my daughter-in-law, I corrected myself. My son's wife, my grandson's mother. Hello. I answered, trying to sound normal. Norman? Rebecca's voice sounded strange. Did you talk to Howie today? Yes. I didn't know what else to say. Did she know? Had Howie told her the truth after the meeting at the lawyer's? He came home in a terrible state, she continued, screaming, hitting dishes, then locked himself in the study. I heard him talking to someone on the phone, but he wouldn't come out. Ethan's scared. I don't know what to do. I took a deep breath. It wasn't my place to tell her about my husband's double life. but I couldn't lie. Rebecca, we had a meeting with Evelyn's lawyer, the reading of the will. There, some things came up that upset Howie. What things? She sounded worried. Did it have to do with the inheritance? He said that Evelyn had promised to help pay for college for Ethan. College for Ethan? Another lie. Evelyn never promised anything like that. At least not to me. And judging by her diary, she's been reluctant to give Howie any money in recent months. Rebecca, I think you should talk to Howie. I tried. He won't answer. There was desperation in her voice. Please, Norman, if you know what's going on. I closed my eyes. What am I supposed to tell her? That her husband had been living a double life for 10 years? That he had another woman and children 4 hours away? That he was counting on Evelyn's inheritance to spend more time with his second family? Rebecca, I really think that's what Howie should tell you, I finally said. But if he's not out by tonight, call me and I'll be there. I promise. She was quiet for a moment. Okay, she said quietly. Yeah, I'll try to talk to him again. How's Ethan? I asked, suddenly feeling a pang of longing for my grandson. Scared. I've never seen his father like that. I sent him to a neighbor's house so he wouldn't hear all this. Tell him Grandpa loves him very much, I said, feeling a lump in my throat. Of course, she said quietly. Norman, it's something serious, isn't it? Yes, I couldn't lie. I'm afraid it is. After I'd talked to Rebecca, I sat staring at nothing for a long time. What would happen to them when the truth came out? What would happen to Ethan? And what would happen to that other family, Veronica, Jason, and little Emma? I opened the detective's report again, rereading the last few pages. Howie had planned to use Evelyn's inheritance to spend more time with the second family. But what now? When his plans fell apart? When he was left without the money he'd counted on? The report showed Howie's financial situation. It was worse than I thought. The store was barely afloat. Loans, debts, mortgage on a house in Trinidad and a house in Portland. He was living beyond his means, trying to support 2 families, 2 homes, 2 lives, and all the while counting on Evelyn's inheritance, which had now passed to me. My son wasn't just a liar. He was a financial disaster about to unfold. And now that his plans had collapsed, he was backed into a corner. I remembered his face in Kingsley's office. Pale, eyes widened with fear. I remembered how he'd run out without a word to justify himself. He realized that the game was over, that all his houses of cards were collapsing at once. What should I do? What would Evelyn do in my place? There was another passage in the journal that I didn't notice right away. I believe there is good in Howie. I believe he loves his children, all his children. I believe that somewhere deep down inside he realizes what he's doing is wrong. Norman has always believed that problems should be dealt with directly and honestly. Maybe he's right. Maybe we should have made Howie face his lies a long time ago. Evelyn questioned her decision not to tell me the truth. Maybe if we'd known sooner, if we'd confronted Howie with the consequences of his lies, things might have been different. Maybe he would have found the strength to change, to choose one path. Now it's too late. Evelyn's gone, and Howie. Howie had trapped himself in a trap from which there was no easy way out. I looked at my watch, almost noon. Rebecca hadn't called back, so Howie's still locked in his office, planning his next move. What's he going to do? Confess everything? Run away? Try to convince Rebecca that the will isn't fair? That I somehow deceived Evelyn? Either way, I need to be prepared. I gathered all the documents from the box and from the detective's folder and put them back together. This story wasn't over yet, and I had to preserve the evidence. Suddenly there was a knock on the door, insistent, loud. I tensed. Howie, had he really decided to come and talk? I went to the door, hesitated a second, then opened it. On the threshold stood an unfamiliar woman, dark-haired, slender, with attentive brown eyes. Next to her was a girl of about 6, looking remarkably like little Howie. "Are you Mr. Prescott?" the woman asked in a strained voice. "Howard's father." I nodded, unable to utter a word. Standing before me was Veronica Lynch, my son's second wife, whom I'd learned of a few hours ago, and next to her was my granddaughter, whom I hadn't known about until today. "We need to talk," Veronica said. It's about your son and what happened today. Come in, I said, stepping aside to let the unexpected guests in. Veronica entered, holding the girl's hand tightly. There was wariness in her movements, but also determination. Emma, she turned to her daughter, why don't you watch TV while Mr. Prescott and I talk? The girl nodded and walked obediently into the living room. I turned on the children's channel and returned to Veronica, who was standing in the hallway, nervously rubbing the strap of her bag. How did you know where I lived? I asked, trying to collect my thoughts. Howie called me this morning. He was in a panic, talking incoherently about the will, about everything being out in the open. Said he was on his way over to explain, but he never showed up. I found your address in his address book. I took her into the kitchen, offered her coffee. She declined but sat down at the table, across from the folder with the detective's report. I noticed her eyes sliding over the files. So you know, she said. Not a question, a statement. I found out today. At the reading of my wife's will, Veronica lowered her eyes. I'm so sorry about your wife and this whole situation. How long had you known he was married? I asked her bluntly. She looked up at me with tired eyes. From the very beginning. He didn't hide the fact that he had a wife and a son, but he said they were separated, that the marriage was only on paper, for the sake of the child, that he was going to get a divorce when the time came. And you believe that? I was a single mom with a little boy. Howie seemed so caring, so attentive. He helped with Jason, spent all his free time with us. Yeah, I believed him. And then it got harder to leave. Emma was born. Howie bought us a house. He always said he was about to make up his mind, about to tell his family the truth. But as time went on, nothing changed. I looked at that woman and I couldn't hate her. She was a victim too. A victim of my son's lies, his manipulations, his weakness. Why did you come here? I asked. I'm afraid that Howie will do something rash. He always said we could be a real family when his mother... She stopped talking, realizing the indelicacy. Anyway, he was counting on the inheritance. And now it's all mine, I finished. And you think I'm going to give you money? Veronica straightened, a flicker of resentment in her eyes. No, Mr. Prescott, I didn't come for money. I wanted to warn you. Howie's not the kind of man to give up easily. He's going to fight for his inheritance, and I'm afraid his methods won't be the cleanest. As if to confirm her words, the phone rang. Rebecca's number. Excuse me, I said to Veronica and answered. Hello? Norman, Rebecca's voice sounded agitated. Howie just left. He says he's on his way to see a lawyer, that he's going to contest the will, that you somehow manipulated Evelyn while she was sick. I closed my eyes. Here we go. Rebecca, that's not true. I didn't manipulate Evelyn. I didn't even know about her decision until today. I don't know what to believe, Norman. Howie says these things. That you've always hated him. That you convinced Evelyn to disinherit him because you're jealous of his success. Rebecca, listen to me. Evelyn left a video message explaining her decision. It has nothing to do with my influence. It has to do with what she learned about Howie. What could she have learned? She sounded genuinely perplexed. What could Howie have done to make her disinherit him? I looked at Veronica sitting across from me. That's what. But it wasn't my place to talk about it. Rebecca, I think you'd better wait for Howie and have a serious talk with him. Ask him straight out what Evelyn found out. After a pause, she asked quietly, It's something terrible, isn't it? Yes, Rebecca. I'm afraid it is. She was silent for a moment longer. Then she said, Ethan is asking about you. Can he come to see you this weekend? Shuck him. Sure, I felt a lump come up in my throat. I would be very happy to. We said goodbye and I hung up. Veronica looked at me with understanding. His wife, she said. Not a question, an affirmation. I nodded. She doesn't know. Not yet anyway. She will, Veronica said with the confidence of someone who'd been through a lot. Howie wouldn't be able to hide the truth for long, especially now that his plans had fallen apart. Soon Veronica and Emma left. I sat in silence for a long time, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. Not even a week later, the real war had begun. Howie had actually hired a lawyer and filed a lawsuit to contest the will. He was also actively turning everyone who would listen against me. Evelyn's relatives, our mutual acquaintances, our neighbors. He spread the story of how I manipulated my sick wife, taking advantage of her weakness. How could you, Norman? Evelyn's sister Patricia called me outraged. Evelyn always said she wanted to leave the house to Howie and Rebecca, always concerned about her grandson's future, and now she's leaving everything to you? That's not right. I tried to explain that Evelyn's decision was justified, that she had learned something that had completely changed her attitude toward her son. But no one would listen. Everyone had already decided that I was a greedy old man taking advantage of my wife's illness to take the inheritance from the poor boy. Even the neighbors looked askance. Mrs. Flynn, the kind woman who had brought me food after Evelyn's death, now averted her eyes when I met her. I called Arthur Kingsley, told him what was happening. "Don't worry, Mr. Prescott," he said confidently. "The will is impeccable. We have a video message from your wife and a detective's report with evidence of your son's double life. No court would invalidate the will." "It's not just the legal side," I replied. "Howie's turning my whole family, all my friends, against me. He's spreading lies and people believe him." "It's hard," Kingsley agreed, "but the truth is on your side." That evening, Rebecca called to tell me that Howie had packed up and left the house. "He didn't explain anything," she said, and I could hear the tears in her voice. "He just said he had some things he needed to take care of and that he would contact me through a lawyer." "A lawyer, Norman?" As if we were strangers. I didn't know what to say. Howie was acting predictably. Cornered, he was running away from responsibility, from having to explain himself. "Veronica came by today," Rebecca continued after a pause. "We talked for a long time. She showed me pictures, letters. 10 years, Norman. 10 years he lied to me. Lied to all of us. So that's why Howie ran away. Veronica decided to put an end to the lies. She promised that when she left me," said Rebecca deserved to know the truth. "How's Ethan?" I asked, thinking about my grandson. "He doesn't understand what's going on yet. I told him Daddy was away on business. I don't know what I'll say when he starts asking why Daddy doesn't call, doesn't come. I promised to help in any way I could." I offered to come and stay with them, but Rebecca said no, said she needed time to think things through. The next day I got a letter from Howie's lawyer, a formal notice of probate proceedings. The letter listed the grounds: the testatrix's mental state at the time the document was made, undue influence by her spouse, and even possible signature forgery. Kingsley, to whom I immediately forwarded the document, only laughed at these accusations, said they don't stand a chance in court. "We have a video message from your wife, testimony from 3 independent psychiatrists about her mental health at the time of the will, and, of course, a detective's report proving your son's motives," he listed. "Don't worry, Mr. Prescott. Legally, we're perfectly safe, but it wasn't the legal side that bothered me. It was the thought of having to release all this dirt, all the evidence of Howie's double life, that not only the people closest to him would find out, but strangers as well. That it would completely ruin Ethan's life, Veronica's children's lives." That evening, while sorting through books in Evelyn's study, I accidentally hit an old letterbox on the top shelf. It fell, opened, and dozens of envelopes tied with faded ribbon spilled out onto the floor. I started picking them up and suddenly noticed my name on one of the envelopes. It was Evelyn's handwriting, but not as neat as usual, hurried, nervous. The date on the envelope was 3 weeks before she died. The letter was unsealed. I pulled out a folded piece of paper and began to read. "Dear Norman, I don't know if you will ever read these lines. I don't know if I'll have the courage to give you this letter. Perhaps it will remain in my box as a silent witness to my thoughts these last days. I have learned something terrible about our son, something that completely changed the way I felt about him. You always felt something was wrong with Howie. Remember how you told me he asked for money too often? That his business development stories weren't adding up? I wasn't listening to you. I was defending him, making excuses for him. Like any mother, I only saw the good in my child, refused to see the warning signs. Now I know the truth. I know about his double life, the woman in Portland, the children he kept from us. I know about the money he took from us under false pretenses. I know about the plans he made, counting on my inheritance after I died. I can't tell you this now. I can't see the pain in your eyes when you find out that our son is not the man we raised. I can't add that heaviness to your grief at my passing. So I've made a decision. I've changed my will. I'm leaving everything to you, Norman, the man who never betrayed me, never lied to me, even when the truth was painful. A man who was there for me during the darkest days of my illness, when I couldn't even get out of bed. The man who'd loved me all my life, not perfectly, not without mistakes, but sincerely and honestly. Howie will be angry. He'll blame you. Probably try to contest the will. But I've planned for that. Arthur will help you. He has all the documents, the evidence, my video message. I know you're strong, Norman. I know you can handle it. And I know that despite everything, you still love our son. And so do I. Love doesn't just die, even after betrayal. Maybe someday Howie will realize his mistakes. Maybe he'll find the strength to change. I pray for that every day. In the meantime, live, Norman. Live life to the fullest. You deserve it after all the years you've spent taking care of me. Travel, see your friends, do what you love. Don't let grief and disappointment determine your future. I've loved you for 40 years, and I will always love you, even after I'm gone. Yours, Evelyn. The courtroom was almost empty. A few lawyers preparing for the next hearing, a clerk, a bailiff. In the front row, me, Kingsley, and a couple other people I didn't know. Howie sat across the aisle next to his lawyer, a wiry, middle-aged man with a tenacious gaze. His son looked gaunt, dark circles under his eyes. He didn't look at me. Judge Eleanor Davis, a woman in her 60s with shrewd eyes, was reviewing the documents in front of her. Evelyn's video message had been shown at the beginning of the hearing, and I noticed the judge watching Howie's reaction carefully as she watched. He sat motionless, staring at the floor. Now, Judge Davis said, raising her eyes from the papers, I have reviewed the case file, including the report of the private investigator hired by the deceased Evelyn Prescott, Mrs. Prescott's video message, and the reports of 3 independent psychiatrists on her mental state at the time of the will. She looked at Howie's attorney. Mr. Walsh, your client claims that Mrs. Prescott was under the undue influence of her spouse. However, the evidence you have provided does not support that. Moreover, Mrs. Prescott's video statement clearly indicates that the decision to disinherit her son was made by her alone, in full knowledge of the consequences, based on information she received months before her death. Walsh rose from his seat. Your Honor, we contend that the video message may have been recorded under duress. My client is prepared to present testimony from neighbors and relatives, confirming that his mother had always expressed a desire to leave an inheritance specifically to him and his son. Judge Davis raised an eyebrow. The conclusions of the 3 independent psychiatrists who were present when the video message was recorded left no doubt that Mrs. Prescott acted voluntarily and was clearly conscious. As for the testimonies of neighbors and relatives, I'm afraid they have no validity against a formal will drawn up according to all the rules of the law. She looked at me, then at Howie. I also familiarized myself with the evidence of Mr. Howard Prescott's double life provided by the defendant's attorney. I have to say, I find this evidence compelling. Bank statements showing systematic diversion of funds from the mother to support a second family. Photographs, proof of real estate purchases. All of these indicate that Mrs. Prescott had good reason to reconsider her treatment of her son and consequently her will. Howie finally looked up, and I saw a mixture of anger and fear in his eyes. His lawyer was whispering something in his ear, but he wasn't listening, looking at the judge. Your Honor, he began, rising from his seat despite his lawyer's attempts to hold him back. It's not true. This man, he pointed at me, never loved me. He always turned my mother against me, always cold, distant. Mr. Prescott, Jr., the judge interrupted him. This court is not in the business of finding out about family relationships. It's in the business of the law, and as a matter of law, your mother's will is perfect. I have no grounds to invalidate it. She took the gavel. The suit is dismissed. The will of Evelyn Mary Prescott is hereby declared valid. The estate passes to her husband, Norman Edward Prescott, according to her last will and testament. The clang of the gavel sounded like the end of a long story. Howie stood up with a jerk, knocking over his chair, and sprinted out of the courtroom without waiting for the hearing to end. His lawyer apologized to the judge and hurried after him. Kingsley shook my hand. Derek. Congratulations, Mr. Prescott. Justice has been served. I nodded, feeling no joy. Yes, I had won the case. But what had I really won? Evelyn's money and property, which had never interested me the way Howie had. Official confirmation that my son was a liar and manipulator who'd been living a double life for 10 years. A bittersweet victory. There was a surprise waiting for me on my way out of the courthouse. Rebecca with Ethan. When the boy saw me, he rushed toward me. Grandpa. He hugged me, and I felt the tension of the last few weeks let go a little. We've been waiting for you. I looked at Rebecca with a mute question. I wanted to support you, she said simply. And Ethan really missed you. We went to a cafe nearby. While Ethan was excitedly telling me about school, Rebecca asked quietly, how'd it go? The judge dismissed Howie's lawsuit. The will was declared valid. She nodded, looking into her cup. That's what I thought. Veronica showed me copies of the documents she had. It's irrefutable. How are you? I asked, looking at her face, at the new wrinkles around her eyes. Day by day, she answered with a sad smile. Sometimes I think it's all a bad dream, that I'll wake up and Howie will be there, and everything will be just as it was before. Then I remember that the way it was an illusion, that all this time he's been lying to me, living a double life. Luckily, Ethan was too engrossed in his ice cream to hear our conversation. Did you file for divorce? I asked quietly. Yes. The lawyer says the process won't be difficult, given the circumstances. Howie's not contesting, even agreed to all my terms for custody of Ethan. Does he see his son? Rebecca shook her head. No. He's called a couple times, but it's been, formal, like he was doing his duty. Ethan asks about him every day. I looked at my grandson, an innocent victim of adult lies. My heart squeezed at the thought that the boy would have to grow up without a father, not because of tragedy or circumstance, but because of Howie's conscious choice to live a lie. After the cafe, I walked them to the car. Ethan hugged me tightly goodbye. Will you come visit us this weekend? He asked hopefully. Mom said that you can come whenever you want. I will, I promised, feeling my heart grow warm at his words. Rebecca hugged me too. You're always welcome in our home, Norman, she said. No matter what happens between you and Howie, Ethan and I are your family. I watched them leave and thought that despite all the losses, I still had someone to live for. Tobias met me at home, meowing demandingly for food. I fed the cat, made myself some tea and sat at the kitchen table, looking out the window at the darkening garden. Evelyn's garden, she'd always loved tinkering with plants, creating her own little paradise on earth. Now many of the flowers had wilted without her care. This house, this garden, this whole life, everything reminded her of her. Every corner held memories. Here we had breakfast on weekends. Here we watched movies in the evenings. Here she sat in an armchair reading her favorite books. And here the emptiness of her absence, so palpable that sometimes it's hard to breathe. The decision came suddenly, but with a sense of rightness, as if it had been maturing inside for a long time. I can't stay in this house. There are too many memories, too much pain, too much Evelyn in every corner. And at the same time, she's gone and will never be. I have to start a new life, not forgetting the past, but not letting it hold me captive either. Must find a new place where I can hold the memory of Evelyn in my heart, but without being surrounded by constant reminders of loss. I spent the next few days looking for a new home. Not in Trinidad. There are too many memories here too many people who know our family's history. I looked in neighboring towns, close enough to see Ethan, but far enough away to start over. Found a small cottage in a seaside town about an hour outside of Trinidad. 2 bedrooms, living room, overlooking the ocean, small garden. Not like Evelyn's and my house, and that was a good thing. Negotiated the purchase, signed all the necessary papers, then put our old house on the market. The real estate agent said that a house like that in a good neighborhood wouldn't be on the market for long. He was right. A week later, there was already a buyer, a young couple with a small child. They fell in love with the garden, the spacious rooms, the atmosphere of warmth and comfort that Evelyn had created over the decades. A new family will grow here, I thought. New memories, a new life. Evelyn would love it. The hardest part remained, sorting through my things, deciding what to take with me and what to leave behind. I started with Evelyn's study, the most painful room in the house. Her books, her papers, her personal belongings. Each item held a piece of her soul. Box by box, I packed what I wanted to keep. Photo albums, letters, special souvenirs from our travels. The rest, furniture, household items, were to be left to the new owners or go to charity. While cleaning, I found another letter from Evelyn hidden between the pages of her favorite book. It was dated the last week of her life. "Dear Norman," she wrote, "as you read this, I am no longer with you. I hope you have found the strength to move on. I know how hard it will be for you without me, as hard as it would be for me without you. But life goes on, my love, and I want you to live, to truly live, not just exist. Don't let your grief and disappointment in Howie determine your future. I know how much it will hurt you when you find out the truth about him. I know you'll blame yourself, look for mistakes in the past, wonder where we took a wrong turn. Don't do that. Some things just happen, and we can't always prevent or change them. Instead, focus on what you still have, on Ethan, on your hobbies, on the friends who have always been supportive. Maybe even find a new hobby or travel. You've always wanted to see the Grand Canyon in different seasons, remember? And know this, wherever I am now, I'm always with you. In the sound of the waves, in the breeze, in the quiet rustle of the leaves, in your heart, which I know better than my own. Live, my love. Live for both of us. Forever yours, Evelyn." I folded the letter and tucked it in my pocket, next to my heart. Evelyn always knew what to say, even from across the border of life and death. My last days in the old house were spent in feverish packing. I gave away furniture I didn't want to take to a charitable organization, gave away books I had no intention of reading again, packed up the most precious things, the ones that held the memory of Evelyn and our life together. I hadn't tried to contact Howie or heard from him since the trial. Rebecca said he'd left Trinidad, probably for Veronica. She didn't know for sure and didn't seem to want to know. On the last evening before I left, I sat in the empty living room surrounded by boxes. Tobias was wary of the unfamiliar space of room without familiar furniture, without the coziness he'd known all his life. "Don't worry, buddy," I said to the cat, stroking his ear. "You'll like the new house, too. There's a garden there and the sea is close by, and lots of new places to explore." I pulled an old suitcase out of the pantry, the same one Evelyn and I had taken on our wedding trip. Scuffed leather, faded stickers with the names of the places we'd visited. I started putting away personal belongings, clothes, hygiene items, a few books for the trip. At the bottom of the suitcase was our wedding photo, the same one I had started my memories with after Evelyn's death. Young, happy, full of hopes and plans. Not knowing what lay ahead, joys and sorrows, successes and failures, the birth of a son and his betrayal, illness and death. I looked at the photo and suddenly felt not sadness, but gratitude. Gratitude for 40 years by the side of this amazing woman, for a life full of love, despite all the difficulties, for choosing me, staying with me, supporting me all these years. And I realized that the best revenge for Howie, the best response to his betrayal, was not anger, not resentment, but this: to live my remaining years with dignity and happiness, as Evelyn would have wanted. Not to let bitterness poison my life, not to shut myself off from the world because of one person, even if that person was my son. I carefully placed the photograph in my suitcase with Evelyn's last letter on top. Tomorrow begins a new chapter of my life, a life without her by my side, but with her love in my heart. A life without daily contact with my son, but with a grandson who needs a grandfather. A life where the past is the past and the future is not yet written. I closed my suitcase, walked around the house one last time, checking to see if I'd forgotten anything important. I lingered in the bedroom, staring at the empty space where our bed had been. So many nights spent together, so many conversations before bed, so many hugs when the rest of the world ceased to exist. "I love you, Evelyn," I said into the emptiness of the room. "I always have, and I always will. Was it just me, or did a slight breeze touch my cheek like an invisible hand, a quiet whisper in the rustle of the curtain, like a distant voice saying, I know, my love. I know. In the morning, I loaded my things into the car, put Tobias in the carrier in the back seat, took one last look at the house where I'd lived most of my life. I felt no regret, just a quiet certainty that I was doing the right thing. I got behind the wheel, started the engine. A new road ahead, a new home, a new life. Not perfect, not without loss and regret, but my own. The life Evelyn would want for me. I pulled onto the highway, heading toward the coast. The sun was rising above the horizon, coloring the sky pink and gold. A new day, a new beginning. We'll make it, I said, either to Tobias or to myself, or to Evelyn's spirit, which I felt was with me. We'll make it. And for the first time in a long time, I really believed it.